everybody laughs at me, but just get your Africa tickets ready, baby, because it's coming.
There's a global consensus that exists that says it's okay for nearly 6 million black people to die in the heart of Africa and for us to be silent.
There's something wrong with us in terms of the way we think about Africa.
Yo, what's up world? It is Eric Mazumpaka with Siyon Studios. And I just came to an incredible realization. And something that was actually progressive for quite a while. Where should I start this story? Actually, I'll start this story when me, Ben, and Kevin we're all just hanging out, doing our Siyon thing. And we were wandering around, and I think it was about springtime. And we just started talking about, you know, life and just everything, you know, just talking about life. And I remember at one point, Kevin was saying, because the universe can infinitely go in every direction, you know, like for infinite in any direction you look towards it, the universe infinitely goes out. But then he brought up a good point. He said, well, if everything can infinitely go out, does that mean that everything can infinitely go in? And that kind of stuck with me for a very, very long time. And what kind of elaborated on that idea that just came out of nowhere was, I remember a few days ago I was watching a National Geographic's mini documentary about just the universe, you know, like and the galaxies and everything. And one scientist came on and he was saying how like iron, calcium, you know, all the minerals of the planet, the iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, everything was accumulated by stars that exploded like thousands of years ago, you know, and like just things that are floating around in the air that are made of us, you know. So in essence, we're made of everything that's around us, and we're kind of all entangled. Which really was profound for me, was to realize that we are an accumulation of stars that exploded billions of years ago, and the planet is an accumulation of that. So then all of a sudden, I kind of came to the conclusion that if everything infinitely goes out in the universe, and we can infinitely go in, that means there's an infinite amount of possibilities lying in every single individual that roams this planet.
I want to start my story in Germany in 1877, the mathematician named George Cantor. And Cantor decided he was going to take a line and erase the middle third of the line, and then take those two resulting lines and bring them back into the same process, a recursive process. So he starts out with one line, and then two, and then four, and then 16, and so on. And if he does this an infinite number of times, which you can do in mathematics, he ends up with an infinite number of lines, each of which has an infinite number of points in it. So he realized he had its number of elements was larger than infinity. And this blew his mind.
Incredible, you know, this concept of infinite. But then it also kind of stemmed to this other idea that kind of just grew out, was this idea of infinite. And I'm not that knowledgeable about fractals at all, really. But I do have a basic understanding that it is shapes or made of several other shapes, you know. Each part is the same as the whole, but just broken down into scales and very small. And one of my favorite examples is this mathematician who uses his hand. If you look at the inside of your hand, you see the line within a line within a line kind of thing. And this is an incredible, profound knowledge that came about, you know, this concept of infinite. But then he also goes to talk on about how African villages were built on this same concept of fractals, you know, this concept of infinite. And he traveled to Africa and he found that this knowledge of infinite, this concept, lied in African culture for thousands of years, you know?
If you look at an aerial photograph of an African village, you see fractals. And I thought, this is fabulous. I wondered why. And of course, I had to go to Africa and ask folks why. Travel around Africa for a year asking people why they were building fractals. which is a great job if you can get it. And so I finally got to this city, and I'd done a little fractal model for the city just to see how it would sort of unfold. But when I got there, I got to this palace of the chief, and my French is not very good. I said something like, "I'm a mathematician and I would like to stand on your roof." But he was really cool about it. He took me up there and we talked about fractals. And he said, "Oh yeah, we know a rectangle within a rectangle within a rectangle. We know all about that."
And for the idea that everything can infinitely go out and we can infinitely go in, this whole concept of infinite, you know?
Very different uses for fractals. It's a shared technology in Africa. And finally, well, isn't this just intuition? It's not really mathematical knowledge. Africans can't possibly really be using fractal geometry, right? It wasn't invented until the 1970s.
So with this kind of knowledge, why would we live our lives kind of limited if every single individual roaming the planet has infinite amount of galaxies and everything inside you? So live your life infinite and not limited. Because for every step that you take outwards, remember, we can also take that inwards. And every single person is capable of infinite amount of possibilities. Not only one individual, but every single person can live infinitely with infinite possibilities.
The most complex example of an algorithmic approach to fractals that I found was actually not in geometry. It was in a symbolic code. And this was Bamana sand divination. And the same divination system is found all over Africa. You can find on the East Coast as well as the West Coast. And often the symbols are very well preserved. So each of these symbols has 4 bits. It's a 4-bit binary word. You draw these lines in the sand randomly. And then you count off, and if it's an odd number, you put down 1 stroke, and if it's an even number, you put down 2 stroke. And they did this very rapidly, and I couldn't understand where they were getting, they only did the randomness 4 times. I couldn't understand where they were getting the other 12 symbols. It's a pseudo-random number generator. They're using deterministic chaos. When you have a 4-bit symbol, you then put it together with another one sideways. So even plus odd gives you odd plus even gives you odd. Even plus even gives you even, odd plus odd gives you even. It's addition modulo 2, just like in the parity bit check on your computer. And then you take this symbol and you put it back in, so it's a self-generating diversity of symbols. They're truly using a kind of deterministic chaos in doing this. Now, because it's a binary code, you can actually implement this in hardware. What a fantastic teaching tool that should be in African engineering schools. And the most interesting thing I found out about it was historical. In the 12th century, Hugo of Santillana brought it from Islamic mystics into Spain. And there it entered into the alchemy community as geomancy, the divination through the earth. This is a geomantic chart drawn by, for King Richard II in 1390. Leibniz, the German mathematician, talked about geomancy in his dissertation called De Combinatoria. And he said, well, instead of using 1 stroke and 2 strokes, let's use a 1 and a 0. And we can count by powers of 2, right? 1s and 0s, the binary code. George Boole took Leibniz's binary code and created Boolean algebra, and John von Neumann took Boolean. So all these little PDAs and laptops, every digital circuit in the world started in Africa. And I know Brian Eno says there's not enough African in computers, but I don't think there's enough African history in Brian Eno.